Hello everybody, this is Shane from Shane's Books and Review. I hope that you're having a wonderful day and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Sherlock Holmes. Again, yes, but it's the memoirs and we're doing the next three. So let's go over the short list, shall we? The first one that we're going to be talking about today is The Adventure of the Rygat. The Adventure of the Rygat? Yeah, The Adventure of the Rygat Spire. This one was published in 1893. The next one that we're going to be talking about is The Adventures of the Crooked Man. Yes. And that one was published as well in 1893. And that will be followed up with the third one, which is The Adventure of the Resident Patient. Again, published in 1893. The first one we're going to talk about today is The Adventure of the Rygat. Squire? I got through it, right? Yeah. All right. In the opening, this one is a little bit more chancy, or on the chin. I really like the opening sequence because this time Sherlock has got a illness that he is recovering from, and I should say illness. Watson tries to figure out a way to get Sherlock out of the house and away from Baker Street so they can relax. You already see where this is going? Not much relaxation. Watson and Sherlock go down to visit with one of Watson's friends, which is Colonel Hayter. And at Colonel Hayter's place, they're all sitting around relaxing, and then stories start getting told. These stories have to do with recent crimes. And before Colonel Hayter goes upstairs to get a good nap in for the evening, he's like, don't let this alarm you, but I'm going to take this gun right here with me while I go to bed. And hence it begins. The whole thing that prompted the gun was the robbery that had happened at the Acton's place. And at the Acton's place, there was just this really odd, macabre assortment of things that were took. Just things that you would need if you had, like, tore your jacket sleeve or something. There really wasn't anything of substance that the thief or thieves had took. Now, in the next morning, I believe it was the butler that told Colonel Hayter and Sherlock and Watson about the murder that had happened that previous evening, just a few places down the road. And they started discussing the details whenever Inspector Forrester showed up. And there was a little bit of wordplay here between Colonel Hayter, Watson, and Sherlock. The inspector is looking for some help, and Watson is much flummoxed because he just wanted his friend to relax. After the descriptions that is given by Inspector Forrester of the Cunningham's, he describes the scene of there's a door that was broken in, and the butler over there defended his master's property to his end. While Sherlock is talking to Inspector Forrester, it becomes very obvious to him that there is one thing that was missed, a very big detail, and that is in that torn note from the dead person's hand, there's actually two persons' writings alternating back and forth. And there was a neat little dialogue that Sherlock shared about this on this person is this because of these little things, this person is this because of these things, this person wrote it first because of this. I mean, it's all kind of obvious in retrospect, and it would be for somebody that's used to that kind of a thing, but let's think about the 1800s. He expounds on his reasoning of why he thinks it was two people and is curious on why there was two people. Now this is where his illness starts to come into play. He starts using it as an excuse, cuts off Inspector Forrester, and they end up, of course, at the Cunningham's place to do the inspections and talk to people. When Sherlock is speaking with young Alec, which is, of course, the son of Mr. Cunningham, he gets him to describe the things that had happened, and that there was some struggling in between the butler and whomever it was, and then he heard a shot and the butler fell. Now, Sherlock is known for his impeccable accounting of details. He is never wrong, and he makes a mistake here. Whenever he's speaking to Mr. Cunningham, and it has a paper that he's already drawn up, stating a reward for something, he misplaced the date on purpose so that he could get Mr. Cunningham to write the word 12, because that would give him the rest of the clues that he needed on was it indeed the Cunninghams. There was a detail that became kind of problematic, and that was that the door was forced, but Alec was inside. And it didn't really make sense that somebody that young that would be inside upon hearing that. It just, the things didn't add together very well with the story of what had happened with the butler. Sherlock starts making, like I said, that use of the fake illness, and they go in to inspect a room, and he fakes a fit, knocks a table over, and blames it on Watson. And while everybody's distracted trying to pick up the mess, Sherlock darts off. Upon this darting, he goes to another room and ends up finding the rest of the note and starts screaming, "Help, murderer!" Upon Watson and Inspector Forrester rejoining Sherlock, they find that note, and Sherlock breaks out everything that had happened. The little plot twist that happens has to do with some things that young Alec didn't know that William Cunningham, his father, was doing, and vice versa. You see, young Alec had fallen in with the two people that were thieves. Now, William, on the other hand, had followed the two robbers and was going to use it as blackmail for ultimate gain for himself. So where the things seemed completely not related, they kind of were in a way. Now, for the second one, which is The Adventure of the Crooked Man. This story was unique in a good way. There's a lot of little details in this one. There's details in the other Sherlock stories as well, but these were make it or break it details. So the setup is a lot different than other stories. Sherlock approaches Watson one evening, and that evening that he approaches him, he's like, "Hey, Watson, you want to come see the end of an investigation? Should be pretty fun." And Watson, of course, agrees, and he's not let down. Upon sharing the details of the case, Sherlock tells Watson about a Colonel James Barclay and his wife Nancy. And it's looking fairly bad on Nancy because she goes out with her neighbor, and they're doing a church type of an errand, and upon returning, she asks the maids for some tea. But she asks for it in a room she normally wouldn't go into, and this is really odd behavior for her. Now, upon hearing that his wife is home, Colonel Barclay joins her for the tea. As a maid is bringing them the tea, she overhears a argument, not so much a discussion, and in that argument, the name David is used. As a maid is bringing them the tea, she overhears a argument, not so much a discussion, and in that argument, the name David is used. Now, they draw the room for the couple, they being the maid and a coachman, and that is pretty much the last time that Colonel James Barclay is seen alive. This is why it's looking bad on Nancy. Now, the whole way that this was discovered, the murder of Barclay, was that suddenly there was a scream from the colonel, a loud crash, and the coachman and the maid go to find out what happened in the room. Now, upon getting to the room and trying to open the door, they can't quite get it open. It seems to be locked from the inside. The coachman remembers about the glass door that's on the other side of the house and goes through that instead, since the door inside wouldn't open, and what he finds is a murder scene. Colonel Barclay is laying on the floor dead in a pool of blood. His wife Nancy is passed out cold, and she's not responding whatsoever, and there seems to be this odd weapon, that long, the ball in the end of it. This is why it's not looking so good for Nancy. It looks like maybe she has killed her husband and then passed out. That was the thing that got Sherlock's interest, really, because it seems like it might not be so cut and dry. And the whole thing that tipped Sherlock off about this was the key that should have been inside the door, but was missing, which was the reason why the coachman couldn't get in. And he's also fairly certain that Miss Morrison, which is the neighbor, is going to be the one that holds the actual key to solving the case, hence him going and speaking with her. Whenever Sherlock approaches Miss Morrison and tells her about the direness of the situation for Nancy and what it looks like that she could in fact be the person that murdered the husband, but he feels that there's something that's been missed, Miss Morrison falls apart like a wet napkin. And in fact, she apologizes and she says she was only trying to protect her friend because there was this odd gentleman that they ran into while they were out. He was kind of a blunt individual, and he was only this tall and gave a incredibly good description of this guy. And the thing that kind of unnerved her the most was just randomly he yells out Nancy's name, and Nancy's like, don't worry about it. This guy is actually harmless regardless of what he may look like. So just hang out over here while we have a conversation. Now, by the next day, Sherlock has figured out that this is a Mr. Henry Woods. And so he and Sherlock go to visit Mr. Henry Woods and finds out some interesting things about him. The first thing is, Henry Woods, apparently, before he became the blunted, misshapen guy, was actually quite a tall figure. He was a very handsome individual. And in fact, it was Nancy who was in love with him, and not her in love with Colonel Barclay. The whole situation unravels fairly quickly as the case was blown open by that one small detail of who that person could have been. And Sherlock finds that indeed things weren't as they appear whenever the coachman had walked in. Henry had been duped essentially a long time ago. He was supposed to be going on a military action, and Barclay pretty well set him up to get him out of the picture. Henry's life went downhill real quick. He ended up becoming a slave to one group of people and an indentured servant to others, and was beaten and tortured and had a fairly hard life. But he's found his own little niche now where he does kind of this performance for fellow soldiers. When he happened to be going over to the Barclays, he overheard the screaming as well. Upon seeing Henry, Colonel Barclay died. Apparently this is the thing that has been bothering him, and soldiers had reported that clearly Colonel Barclay needed his wife more than she needed him, which now kind of makes more sense. And also the bouts of depression and madness make a lot more sense too, because he's been a tortured soul over the years over what he did to one of his best friends upon seeing Henry, and died. But as he was dying, he hit his head on a table of sorts, and that was where the blood had come from. Now, the missing key, what happened there? The key was actually in Nancy's hand, and Henry was going to run out the door and try to get help, but he realized how bad that whole situation would look on him. So, even though he had plucked the key from Nancy's hand, he failed to put it back in her hand, pocketed it, and grabbed his mongoose, which was this elusive creature from the get-go that had baffled Sherlock. And they took off. Hence is the end of the adventure of the Crooked Man. Now for number 3 in this one, which is the adventure of the resident patient. I found myself really liking this one. There's a young doctor by the name of Trevelyan, which comes to Sherlock and wants him to explain and try to get some insight on what's going on. He's worried for his employer, which is this older gentleman by the name of Mr. Blessington. And there's a lot of odd circumstances in his life. Mr. Blessington came to him and was like, hey, why aren't you practicing? Why aren't you doing this, that, and the other? It kind of puts him to the screws. And finally whittles it out of him that he's just a poor doctor that's just getting started. Although he's got the mind to do it and the hand to do it, he does not have the finances to get started. So Mr. Blessington comes up with an arrangement with Dr. Trevelyan, so that he's going to buy a house on a prominent street, and he's going to give him pocket cash to spend. The only thing he's really responsible for is the health of Mr. Blessington. And in Mr. Blessington's words, essentially, wear out your diagnostic chair. Mr. Blessington was going to take a little bit of the money, actually 2/3 of the money, and leave the rest to Dr. Trevelyan for his troubles. Simple enough, that arrangement. But then comes a couple of complications. He feels the need to tell him about a couple of patients that have come by having a very odd disorder, but it's the odd times of when they want to come. And then also there was a point where he got dragged up the stairs to look at a footprint after these patients had been there. So Sherlock kind of gets that itch. He realizes that something's off. He and Watson go with Dr. Trevelyan to go visit the place, to take a look around. Now whenever they get there, Mr. Blessington is holed up in a dark room, threatening to kill whoever it is with Dr. Trevelyan, making sure that they are who they say they are. So Sherlock just fairly point blank asks Mr. Blessington who these other two gentlemen are. And why exactly would they want to bother him? Why would they want to cause trouble? Blessington puts on a fairly decent front of, I don't know who they are. All my money's right here in this box. I ain't got much of anything. Why would they be messing with me? And it really ticked Sherlock off. And in fact, left. And he took Watson with him. And he's like, I'm sorry for this waste of time. And made a demand of Mr. Blessington of, you know what you could do? You could try telling the truth. And in a dialogue in between Watson and Sherlock, Watson says something to Sherlock about what do you think is going to happen, and Sherlock, with a little bit of foreshadowing, tells him, oh, don't worry, we'll find out soon enough. He also shares with Watson that somebody that is that afraid of their life probably knows who his assailants would be. News arrives for Sherlock and Watson that Mr. Blessington hung himself in the night. Now we already have this really good setup in the front half, and it's very clear to Sherlock that he wasn't going to get the truth out of Mr. Blessington, which was one of the reasons why he was so disgusted and left. And this is where we see Sherlock kind of hit his stride. And it's one of the things that I enjoy about reading these books is the little details, like the way that the cigars are different cigars from what the gentleman would have been smoking, the way that they were cut versus bit, and that there was 3 other people that were there, and apparently they had come to put on trial Mr. Blessington. Fast forward a little bit, down at the police headquarters, they discovered that the 4 men, being Blessington and the 3 that were in the room, were actually a bank robbery gang from the past, and that Mr. Blessington was the one that had turned state evidence, and the other ones upon getting out. Towards the end, there was one person that was actually dealt with, and the other 3 were thought to have been lost at sea. But again, really good read. And so we've done it. Yay! I'm happy for you. You've made it to the end of the video again. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it in a big, big way. Now, next episode coming out is going to be the final 3 in this book. If you're new here, if you're new to the family, I'd love to have you join. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And then there's step 2, which is please hit the bell and tap on the notifications so that you'll know when a new video comes out. If you happen to like anything you saw in this video, feel free to share it, because sharing is caring. And just a side note, if you happen to find a good book in between now and the next video, please do let me know about it in the description down below, and I will read it along with you guys. Again, this has been Shane with Shane's Books and Review. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. Have a good week, and I'll see you in the next video.